You look at the number that appears on your tax return. It's there, clear, clean, no mistakes, no errors, no warnings, no line suggesting that something is wrong. It's just a number, calculated precisely, confirmed by the system, and in the end, submitted. Everything moves smoothly, exactly the way it is supposed to. And yet, there is a feeling that is very hard to name. Not exactly anxiety, not exactly discomfort either, just something does not feel entirely right. A vague feeling, subtle, but enough for you to notice. You know that somewhere out there, within this same system, under these same rules, someone is looking at a similar number and does not feel the way you do. Not because they are cheating, not because they know more tricks, and not because they are obviously smarter. It is simply that the way this system touches them is not the way it touches you. And that difference is not on the screen. It does not appear in the rows of numbers. It lies in something else. Your position. Your position inside the system. You think taxes are rules, and that is true. They are rules, but they are not the same set of rules applied in the same way to everyone. From the outside, taxes look very clear. You earn a certain amount, you pay a corresponding portion. A simple calculation, a familiar process, an obligation everyone understands. Everything seems fair. But when you begin to look a little more closely, slow down for a moment, and observe more deeply, you begin to see another layer. Taxes are not just numbers. They are the way the system responds to you. A response based on how you earn, how you own, and more importantly than anything else, the position you stand in. At different levels, the same dollar can be treated in completely different ways. Not by accident, not because of an error, but because it was designed that way. Intentionally. This is not a story about finding a few small ways to pay less, not a tips and tricks kind of story. This is a story about understanding why the same system creates different outcomes for different people. And as you begin to move upward, step by step, you start to see it is not just the number that changes. The logic of the game changes too. The higher you go, the less you have to react to the system as something imposed on you from the outside. And gradually, you stand closer to where the way this system operates is actually decided. Level 1. You earn a salary. Everything happens very quickly, almost automatically. Money comes in, taxes are withheld, and the rest is yours. You do not see the process. You only see the result. There is no choice, no strategy, no decision that truly belongs to you. You do not need to think about taxes, and there is not much reason for you to think differently. At this level, life is fairly simple. You go to work, you get paid, you spend. The reward is clarity. There is no complex system to build, no structure to manage, no major risk to carry. Everything feels light. But the cost lies in a very quiet place. You control nothing. You do not decide how money comes in, and because of that, you do not decide how it is taken away. Everything has already been determined before you even touch it. That is where the limit is. You cannot optimize. Something you do not control. And then there comes a moment when the number starts to get a little bigger, when you begin to pay a little more attention. You pause a little longer when you look at it. And that is when the next level begins. Level 2. You begin filing your own taxes. You are no longer completely passive. You open the forms, you fill in the information, You go through each item one by one. For the first time, you truly touch this system. You begin to understand how it works, at least on the surface. And sometimes you get a small portion back. Not much, but enough for you to realize there are openings. The reward here is the feeling of control. Not a huge one, but enough for you to feel that you are no longer completely passive. You start to think, I can do something here. But the cost is that you are still only reacting. You are not changing the structure. You are not shaping the rules of the game. You are simply moving within boundaries that already exist. The limit is very clear. Everything you do takes place inside frameworks that were designed in advance. You can use them, but you cannot change them. And when you do this for long enough, you begin to realize something. Not every type of income is treated the same way. And the moment you realize that is the moment the next level opens. Level 3. You begin to optimize. You are no longer just filing taxes. You read more carefully. You record every expense. You pay attention to every small detail. You take advantage of everything allowed. Every deduction, every provision, every opportunity to reduce your obligation, you look for a way to use it. You no longer just get it over with. You do it strategically. The reward is clear. You keep more. Not because you earn more, but because you lose less. But the cost is time and complexity. You begin having to track more things, remember more, understand more. And there is always a slight feeling that you might miss something. A line, an entry, a small detail. The limitation of this level also begins to reveal itself. You still do not change the nature of the money flow. You are only changing how it is recorded. You are not touching the root. And then, after a while, you begin to realize something even more important. The issue is not how you file. It lies in how you earn. And once you realize that, everything starts to shift. Level 4. You change the structure of your income. You are no longer just a salaried person. You begin creating other forms: contracts, freelance work, a small business, a separate entity standing between you and the flow of money. For the first time, you have a buffer layer. Money no longer goes straight to you, it moves through a structure. And within that structure, you have the power to decide. You decide where the money passes through, how long it stays there, and when it becomes your income. The reward is flexibility. You begin to feel that you can navigate the system, not just react to it anymore. But the cost is responsibility. You have to operate. You have to manage cash flow, paperwork, regulations, and risks you had never had to think about before. A small mistake can become a serious problem. The limitation here is also very clear. Your scale is still small. You can adjust, you can maneuver, but you cannot design yet. You are still playing inside a limited space. And then, as the scale starts to grow, as the flow of money is no longer small, a new layer of logic begins to appear. It is no longer about income structure. It is about the source of that income. Level 5. Your income begins to come from things that are no longer completely dependent on your time. You still work, but not all of your money comes from your presence. Part of it comes from investments. Part of it comes from assets. Part of it comes from things that keep operating even when you are not looking at them. You begin to see that money can move without you having to push it forward step by step. The reward at this level is very clear. The way the system treats you begins to change. quietly. There is no announcement. But if you pay close attention for long enough, you begin to realize the same amount of profit, the way it is taxed, is no longer the way it used to be. Not everything is treated the same. Not everything is taxed immediately. The timing changes, the method changes, and sometimes even the rate changes. But the cost is uncertainty. You no longer directly control the outcome. You depend on the market, on cycles, on factors you cannot control. There are days when everything seems perfectly reasonable. And there are also days when everything moves in a direction you cannot make sense of. The limitation here gradually becomes visible. You have entered the system, but you are still standing outside it. You participate, you benefit, but you do not decide. And if you observe more carefully, you begin to realize something. Not everyone has the same opportunity to participate in these things. Some people always see the opportunity earlier. Some people are always invited into better opportunities. And at that point, you begin to understand that the issue is not just capital. It is access to capital. Level 6. You no longer handle everything on your own. Someone calls you. Someone makes suggestions to you. Someone designs things for you. You begin working with advisors, with accountants, with people who understand this system more deeply than you do. You no longer have to feel your way through every small detail. You have someone to guide you. Strategies you had never thought of before begin to appear. More complex structures, ways of arranging cash flow that, on your own, you would never have seen. The reward is efficiency. It is no longer just about reducing a little. It is about reorganizing the entire way money moves. But the cost is dependence. You begin to trust things you do not fully understand. You sign into structures you did not build yourself. You rely on someone else's system. And gradually, you no longer see the whole picture. You only see your part. The limitation of this level is very clear. You are using the system, but you are not creating it. You are benefiting from it, but you do not control how it exists. And then, at some point, when you begin to own what creates income for other people, everything changes again. Level 7. You do not just earn money. You own what creates money. Not just assets, but operating systems, businesses, structures, flows of money that pass through you before reaching others. At this level, everything slows down a little, not because there is less work, but because each decision becomes heavier. The reward is control. You are no longer passively waiting to see what happens. You decide when income is recognized, when it is retained, and when it is released. You begin to see clearly. Tax is not just the final number. It is something that can be placed somewhere inside the flow of money. But the cost is pressure. Everything becomes more complex. There are no longer small, isolated decisions. Every choice has consequences, not only for you, but for the system you are operating. One wrong move can drag many things behind it. The limitation here does not lie in your ability. It lies in the framework you are inside. You are still playing by the rules, even if you use them very well. And then, if you observe more carefully, you begin to see something. The most important decisions do not happen inside your business. They happen somewhere else. Level 8. You stand close to where the rules are shaped, not by directly writing every provision, but close enough to understand how they come into being. You no longer think about taxes as something to optimize. You see them as part of a larger system, a mechanism, a tool. The reward is influence. You are not just managing your own cash flow, you begin to understand how the flow of money across the entire system is directed, what is encouraged, what is restricted, what is prioritized. But the cost is separation. Few people around you truly see the way you are seeing. Few people understand what you understand. Everything becomes more abstract, less clear, but far more influential. The limitation at this point is no longer money. It is the extent to which you can influence the structure itself. And here, your perception begins to change. You look back at the entire journey and realize a higher level does not mean you are better at paying less tax. That is not it. It means you are no longer playing the same game. At the lower levels, tax is something that happens to you, an obligation, a number you have to accept. At the higher levels, tax becomes a variable, something you can arrange. And at the highest layers, it becomes part of how money flow is shaped from the very beginning. Not a burden, but a tool. A tool used to direct capital, encourage behavior, and keep the structure operating in a certain direction. And when you see that, everything changes. Tax is no longer just an expense. It becomes a signal showing where you stand inside the system. At the bottom, you try to reduce the number you have to pay. You look for one small way after another, one small adjustment after another, just to keep a little more. At the top, the question is no longer how much do you pay? It is what gets counted as payable in the first place? What is called income? What is not? What is taxed? What is deferred? What is moved somewhere else? Money is what you can see. It is clear. It is concrete. It is always there on the screen. But the thing that truly determines the game is not that number. It is structure. Something quiet. Something unseen. But always there. Always operating. And most of the time, never noticed.